Me, 35M, with my wife, 36F, 6 years, 9 pluses couple. Cancer has been a real eye-opener, long. I want to share a deeply personal experience that has been a real eye-opener for me and my family. 2 months ago, I received a life-changing diagnosis, stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. It all began with a routine physical examination, which led to a series of appointments and tests. Just 15 days later, I found myself sitting through my first chemotherapy treatment, a regimen known as ABVD. The journey started when my general practitioner referred me to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. During that appointment, the doctor looked me in the eye and said, "It really looks like lymphoma," but reassured me that only a biopsy could confirm it. Those words struck me like a lightning bolt. I was terrified. And as I left the office, I felt a mix of fear and uncertainty. I called my wife right away to share the news. I thought she would be supportive, but instead she mocked my fears, telling me I was being dramatic and that nothing was certain yet. That weekend I was a bundle of nerves, grappling with the possibility of having cancer while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for our 2 young daughters, aged 3 years and just 4 months. I reached out to my parents, who I'm not particularly close with, to let them know what was happening. They were understandably upset, but offered their support, which I appreciated. As the days passed, I found myself feeling increasingly isolated. My wife seemed to dismiss my concerns entirely. When I asked her to accompany me to the biopsy, she lost her temper and insisted I could go alone. I ended up having to ask my parents to come with me for the procedure, which was a tough pill to swallow. After the biopsy, I returned home to find my wife's entire family gathered at our house. I felt overwhelmed and excused myself to our bedroom, trying to process everything that was happening. I was still recovering from surgery and just needed a moment to breathe. When I finally received the call with my diagnosis, I was devastated. I called my wife to share the news, and as I fought back tears, she asked, "How do they know?" It was a moment that made me realize how disconnected we had become. As I began treatment, I noticed a troubling pattern. My wife didn't seem to consider herself my caregiver, and during a counseling session with the nurse, she remained silent, not engaging in the conversation about what to expect. This lack of support weighed heavily on me. I was already facing the physical challenges of cancer treatment, and the emotional toll of feeling unsupported was equally daunting. Fast forward a couple of months, and I had completed several treatments. I was exhausted and trying my best to manage my responsibilities at home. After a long day of caring for our children and tackling household chores, I hit my limit. I told my wife I needed a break, but instead of understanding, she broke down in tears and accused me of not helping enough. Her words stung, especially since I had been doing my best to contribute despite my condition. In that moment, I realized that our marriage had long been fraught with challenges. I had been married to someone who didn't see our relationship as a partnership, and it was clear that this dynamic wasn't going to change. I reached out to a therapist I had seen in the past, hoping to gain some clarity and support as I navigated this difficult time. Reflecting on this journey, I understand that cancer has not only tested my physical strength, but has also exposed the cracks in my marriage. It's a painful realization, but one that has pushed me to confront the reality of my situation and seek the support I truly need. As I continue to fight this battle, I hope to find a way to rebuild not just my health, but also the connections that matter most in my life. I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. At 35 years old, I was faced with a cancer diagnosis that completely shifted my perspective on everything, especially my marriage. My wife and I had been together for over 6 years, and while I always believed that my hard work and dedication made up for any shortcomings in our relationship, the reality was much different. I realized I deserved better. With my family being distant and my support network nearly non-existent, I felt incredibly isolated. My wife had managed to alienate many of my friends, a huge red flag that I had overlooked for far too long. Thankfully, I reached out to a few close friends who were willing to reconnect, but rebuilding those relationships would take time and effort. I needed someone by my side during this challenging journey, someone who could understand the toll that chemotherapy was taking on me. I didn't want to be expected to be super dad when all I could think about was how nauseous I felt. As I began to contemplate divorce, I spoke with a few attorneys and started working with my therapist to navigate my feelings about cancer and my marriage. Once I completed my first round of treatment, I planned to ask for a separation. My priority was my children, and I believed I could provide a more stable environment for them than my wife could. Not out of spite, but because I genuinely felt I could put their needs above my own. After sharing my thoughts online, I received an overwhelming amount of support and criticism, which helped me process my emotions. 1 week later, I realized that my portrayal of my wife might have been a bit harsh. She wasn't a terrible person. She was a good mother, and I trusted her with our kids. I married her because I believed in her dedication to our family, but the reality was that our relationship had suffered over the years. Taking the advice from my online community, I decided to surprise my wife by inviting my mother over to watch the kids so we could have a dinner date. I wanted to talk about everything that had been weighing on my mind. I had a few key points I wanted to address. I needed to understand how she was coping with the stress of a new baby and my cancer diagnosis, how she thought I was handling my treatment, and the importance of us addressing our long-standing issues as a couple. I could sense that she didn't perceive our situation as a problem. Her responses were disappointing, and it became clear that she struggled to have an open conversation about the serious issues we were facing. However, I noticed that she seemed lighter and happier after our talk, which gave me a glimmer of hope. As the week progressed, I had my chemotherapy treatment on Friday, and by Saturday, I was feeling the effects. I tried to rest, but my wife seemed preoccupied and distant. I called my mother for help, but my wife reacted strongly, insisting she could manage everything on her own. When she finally did come to help, it was only for a brief moment before she took a long nap, leaving me feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. In a moment of desperation, I decided to step away and clear my head. I took a walk on a nearby nature trail, appreciating the beauty of the fall leaves, but when I returned home, I found that nothing had changed. The house was still a mess, and my wife's insistence that she didn't need help felt increasingly hollow. That evening, I confronted her about the burden she was placing on me and how her refusal to accept help was affecting my recovery. I was upset, but tried to remain calm. Unfortunately, my words ignited her anger. She pointed out the small tasks she had completed, like unloading the dishwasher and reheating a meal I had prepared, but in my eyes, it wasn't enough. As we continued to navigate this tumultuous time, I realized that our marriage was at a crossroads. The cancer diagnosis had opened my eyes to the reality of our relationship, and I knew that I had to prioritize my health and well-being. I was determined to find a way to cope with my situation, both as a father and as a husband, and I hoped that in time we could find a path forward together. Life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way, and for me, that challenge came in the form of cancer. At 35 years old, I found myself navigating not only the physical toll of treatment, but also the emotional strain it placed on my marriage. My wife and I had been together for over 9 years, and while we had shared many wonderful moments, the reality of my illness brought to light some serious issues in our relationship. As I underwent chemotherapy, I felt increasingly overwhelmed. The fatigue was unlike anything I had ever experienced, and I struggled to keep up with the demands of being a husband and a father. I often found myself feeling like a full-time babysitter on weekends, which only added to my frustration. One day, after a particularly exhausting week, I confronted my wife about the lack of support I felt from her. Our conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument with hurtful words exchanged. I accused her of not doing enough around the house or with the kids, and she retaliated with insults that stung deeply. In that moment, I realized how much I had been bottling up my feelings. I had always prided myself on being strong and determined, but the reality was that I was struggling. I felt like I was fighting for my life, while also fighting for the attention and support I desperately needed from my wife. I knew I had crossed a line by questioning her worth, but I was at my breaking point. I expressed my fears about my health, reminding her that I could be facing a life-threatening situation. It was a dramatic statement, but it felt necessary to convey the gravity of my circumstances. Reflecting on our relationship, I recognized that my wife had grown up in a challenging environment, which had shaped her emotional responses. While I felt frustrated with her lack of growth, I also felt a deep sense of sadness for her. I didn't want our marriage to end, but I was beginning to question if we could move forward together. I had seen glimpses of her potential before we married, but I had failed to address the issues that were now so glaringly apparent. After our argument, I took a step back to assess my feelings. I realized that I needed to prioritize my health and well-being, especially with the uncertainty surrounding my future. I decided to reach out for help, contacting an attorney to discuss my options should things not improve. I felt a mix of fear and hope, unsure of what the future held for our family. Months passed, and I completed my treatment. As I began to regain my strength, I also started to reflect more deeply on my role in our relationship. I recognized that I had my own struggles, particularly with asking for help. I had always tried to keep the peace, often at the expense of my own needs. This realization was eye-opening. I didn't want my children to inherit my unhealthy coping mechanisms, so I committed to being more open about my feelings and needs. Therapy played a crucial role in my journey. It helped me understand that both my wife and I had our own challenges to navigate. While she struggled with the day-to-day responsibilities, I was learning to articulate my needs and set boundaries. I reached out to her one last time, hoping to have an honest conversation about our relationship. I laid out what I could and couldn't handle, emphasizing the importance of mutual support as we moved forward. As I continue to heal, both physically and emotionally, I hold on to the hope that we can rebuild our relationship. It's a long road ahead, but I'm determined to be a better partner and father, and I'm hopeful that my wife can join me on this journey of growth and understanding. Together, we can face whatever challenges life throws our way, one step at a time. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. For me, that curveball came in the form of a cancer diagnosis. I'm a 35-year-old man, and my wife, who is 36, and I have been together for over 9 years. We've shared many ups and downs, but nothing prepared us for the challenges that cancer would bring to our marriage. During my 6 months of treatment, I found myself in a battle not just with my health, but also with the dynamics of our relationship. Initially, things were pretty tense. My wife struggled to understand the toll that the treatment was taking on me. I was focused on taking care of myself and our kids, and I realized that I needed to prioritize my health, even if it meant putting some demands on her. There were moments when I had to firmly tell her that I needed to rest, regardless of how inconvenient it was for her. It was a tough conversation, but eventually she began to understand. I explained to her that it wasn't just about needing a break. I was physically unable to do certain things. Slowly, she started to give me the space I needed. Instead of following me around, checking in on me, she began to respect my need for solitude. As my treatment progressed, I noticed a shift in her attitude. By the last month, she seemed to lighten up significantly. I was able to stay in bed all day if that's what my body required, without her constantly worrying about whether I was fit enough to help with the kids. It was a relief to feel that support, even if it took some time to get there. One of the biggest revelations during this period was when she admitted how difficult it had been for her to have our baby just 2 months before my diagnosis. We had also learned that she should not have any more children due to health risks. This decision, made for us rather than by us, hit her hard. I had no idea she had wanted more kids or how deeply this affected her. It was a moment of vulnerability that brought us closer, highlighting our emotional immaturity and the struggles we both faced. Despite the progress we made, I knew we still had a long way to go. The core issues in our relationship were still present, but at least they were out in the open now. I decided to stick it out for the time being. I've seen firsthand how hard divorce can be on kids, through my cousins and close friends. If I were to consider that path, I wanted to ensure I had done everything possible to make my marriage work. Divorce is still a possibility, but the small strides we've made give me a glimmer of hope. I'm grateful for the support and feedback I received from the community. Sharing my story has been a therapeutic outlet for me during this challenging time. As we navigate this journey together, I remain committed to working on our marriage, one day at a time.